has the ability to produce cephalosporin as antibiotics. They constitute a subgroup of beta-lactam antibiotics called cephin. Okay? But we have another definition for cephin here. Cephin are subgroup of beta-lactam antibiotics including cephalosporin and cephamycin. But mainly we discuss cephalosporin more, not cephamycin. So they are subgroup of cephin antibiotics, and this word comes because of specific structure which is present inside our main structure. And جماعة الcephin we have cephalosporin and cephamycin. Cephalosporin and cephamycin. But what we discuss is mainly cephalosporin and different generations of cephalosporin. From generation 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then 5. But what we discuss here in cephalosporin is only the beginning of cephalosporin, and then we must have some resources to study more about them. So here, as you see inside this structure, then you very important. Here we have our main part or backbone of the structure. If you remember, we said we had penicillin, and inside this penicillin, we had this ring, beta-lactam ring. You remember, we had beta-lactam ring, which was 4-membered ring. And if you remember, we had probably the acid sensitivity because we had this structure up here in presence of acid. At the same time, we had the structure of this beta-lactam ring by presence of beta-lactamase. But the main difference between cephalosporin and penicillin antibiotic is the second ring, which was necessary for our activity. Cephalosporins are bactericidal. You know, we have a definition for bactericidal versus bacteriostatic. Okay? We have bactericidal effect, which means killing of bacteria. Bacteriostatic effect is stopping of bacteria. Finally, bacteriostatic is as well bactericidal, but it is static because we don't stop. So they are bactericidal, means killing bacteria and not stopping bacteria, because stopping bacteria is bacteriostatic, and work in similar way to penicillin. Similar way to penicillin, it means we have almost same mechanism of action. And you know, mechanism of action of penicillin was what? Was cell wall synthesis inhibitor. Cell wall synthesis inhibitor. And it was related to peptidoglycan, if you remember, it was related to transpeptidase enzyme. If you remember, we said we had transpeptidase enzyme, we had another enzyme which we discussed in the last lecture, which was beta-lactamase enzyme, etc., etc. So when it says it has similar action to the penicillin, it means we have same mechanism of action. They bind to and block the activity of enzyme responsible for making peptidoglycan, an important component of bacterial cell walls. So they are cell wall synthesis inhibitor. Cell wall synthesis inhibitor, same way that we had with the penicillin. Okay. They are broad spectrum antibiotic. You know what's broad spectrum? We have broad spectrum antibiotic, we have narrow spectrum antibiotic. Broad spectrum antibiotic means against gram-positive and gram-negative, and narrow spectrum means more selective, more specific. مرات broad spectrum احنا نحتاج broad spectrum, and sometimes we need narrow spectrum antibiotic based on the situation. So we need both broad spectrum and narrow. يعني إذا واحد يسألكم broad spectrum أحسن ولا narrow spectrum؟ based on specific site of action or specific purpose. مثلا كده اكو دكتور اخصائي مثلا جراح, he wants to prepare his patient for an operation tomorrow. He begins to give a broad spectrum antibiotic, for example cephalosporin, and he says my justification is I want to prepare this patient for operation and then after operation. So he gives one drug which is broad spectrum. Cephalosporin, if you remember, we said simplest one in the case of penicillin was penicillin G. Simplest penicillin was penicillin G. Right now we have naturally occurring cephalosporin is equal to cephalosporin C. So naturally occurring cephalosporin is cephalosporin C. And if you know, for example, in case of morphine, we have the same case. In case of penicillin G, we have the same case. بس اريد جروب الواحد ولا صفحه يعني صار واحد جروب الواحد A B C D E F
لا بالعكس احنا من جهه
صار عكس تمام جروب ثاني اي احسن لانه بالمحاضرات اللي قبلنا كان بوري لانه كان قريب من لانش تايم احسن. If you remember in case of morphine, we said we have naturally occurring compound which was morphine and then we said we need modification حتى يعطي المواد اللي يكون أحسن. In case of penicillin G, same case we had. Normally حالة البنية جماعة الناتشرال they are not so deep, so effective, so desirable in the action. So normally we do modification. نحن نسوي التغييرات على جماعة الناتشرال حتى يعطي جماعة السيمي سينثيتيك لو سينثيتيك حتى يكون هذا أحسن. مثلا in case of morphine we had natural occurring compound but modification of morphine was codeine, modification of morphine was steroid, etc. which were better compound. Or for example modification of penicillin G was penicillin B, ampicillin, amoxicillin, etc. So right now it says naturally occurring cephalosporin is cephalosporin C, but if you go and look inside pharmacies, you do not find cephalosporin C because it was not a good compound. Or we can say because we have right now today better compound in relation to physicochemical properties, better compound in relation to pharmacokinetic properties, etc. So right now what we discussed is cephalosporin C is antibiotic of the cephalosporin class. As you know, it's naturally, so it's the first one, so we do not like it. What we want is modification, تغييرات structure, so we get better compound based on structure activity relationship. It was first characterized in 1961, it was about 60 years ago. Here we have a small comparison between penicillin versus cephalosporin. This structure is common or mushtarak called of beta-lactam, and you remember it because we say in case of presence of HCl we have problem with this part. In case of presence of beta-lactamase we have problem with this part, destruction of this beta-lactam ring, etc. Then we have penicillin. You remember that here in the last lecture we had R1 and R1 was قابل التغيير. With different R1 we will get different structure. You know these stories, right? But here we don't have any R2 or R3, etc. يعني هذا المنطقة كان ثابت. It was in case of penicillin, if you remember. So in case of penicillin, we had a table in the end of the lecture, and we said we have different R1 and we have different penicillin. As well, another point of difference was here, this beta-lactam ring or beta-lactam core was connected to another ring, which was 5-member ring. But in case of cephalosporin, this beta-lactam ring is connected to a 6-member ring, and we have 2 points for the ring. This point is R1, another point is R2. But here we have just R1. Okay? So we have, in case of cephalosporin, different R1 and different R2. As well, inside our lecture, we discussed many structures of many generations of cephalosporin. But at the end of lecture, you have a table, you have a jadwal for different R1 and different R2. So finally, if you want to understand, you read through our lecture. But if you want to memorize, you memorize that table, which is beneficial for you. يعني بالنهاية المحاضرة أكو جدول for different R1, different R2 لأنه قسم المعظم هذا structure مالتها it's constant, it's static. Okay? So The beta-lactam ring, as we say here, in penicillin is connected to a 5-member thiazolidine ring. You remember this word, thiazolidine ring. We say we have beta-lactam and we have thiazolidine ring, which was this ring, and we say it is very, very important for stability of the compound, or penam. Penam, coming from pentam, penam, it is 5-member ring, and the side chain R or R1 differentiate the penicillin from cephalosporin. In case of penicillin, so we have beta-lactam ring connected to 5-member ring, and we have one R which was habilitant ring. But in case of cephalosporin, the beta-lactam ring which is here, which is نقطة المشترك between these two groups, is connected to a 6-member ring, dihydrothiazine. Dihydrothiazine. So we have 6-member ring, and we have two different R. We have R1 and we have R2. يعني مجال التغيير بالسيفالوسبورين أكثر من مجال التغيير بجماعة البنسلين, because we have 2 points. If you remember, in structure activity relationship of penicillin, we say we don't have many room for change. يعني ماكو مجال كل شوية للتغيير. But in case of cephalosporin, we have more room. We have more مجال for تغيير, for modification of structure. Why? Because we have R1 and we have R2. But in case of penicillin, just we have one R, which is very, very important. It's not written inside the slide. يعني ما مكتوب بداخل المحاضرة. هذا كلش مهم. بداخل السيفالوسبورين مجال اكثر لانه عندك R1 R2، بينما بداخل جماعه البنسلين in case of penicillin we have just one. So if someone asks you, please compare the structure of لا لا عيني غير مكانك تعال لا لا وحصلت لكم جديد انا كنت لا ايه. So it is the answer of comparing two structures or two عائلات penicillin versus cephalosporin. أصلا فهمتوا؟ يعني نحن عندنا نقاط الاشتراك ونحن عندنا نقاط الفرق, which is very, very important. And when someone asks why do we have different generation of penicillin, but right now cephalosporin are better and more, and we have more member in cephalosporin because you say we have more room, more majal, more modification for تغييرات structure. Here we have one word, 7-aminocephalosporanic acid, 7-ACA, 7-aminocephalosporanic acid. It is backbone, يعني structure الرئيسي وهذا cephalosporin اللي بيننا. Here we have NH2. So easily, if you look at it, we can extend this NH2. We can replace one of the H for different chemical groupings. And here we have this part. We can easily change this part as well. So let's look what 7-aminocephalosporanic acid, 7-ACA. It is technically 7-aminocephalosporanic acid is the key intermediate in the production of wide variety of semi-synthetic cephalosporin compound. It means it is backbone. It means structure رئيسي. على هذا structure نسوي modifications اللي نحن نريد عيني. Wide variety of semi-synthetic cephalosporin antibiotic. So it is main structure that you must memorize. So 7-aminocephalosporanic acid is the starting material. If you remember, 7-aminocephalosporanic acid is the precursor or is a starting material, just the case that we had with the morphine, if you remember. We say morphine is a good starting material. We say why morphine is a good starting material, if you remember. Right? So right now we have this compound, doesn't follow structure management. It is a good starting material for production of semi-synthetic cephalosporin antibiotic, and when we say semi-synthetic, it's different generation. أجيال مختلفة. And we begin with the cephalosporin generation 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and right now 5. Here is another more simplified structure. Here we have any example of cephalosporin. Here, right now you see here we have instead of NH2, one of the hydrogen has been replaced. In case of cephalosporin acid, we say we have NH2, while here one of the H is replaced. We have بدل H group مختلفة بدل H, or we have X here. Okay, main structure is constant. Main structure معناتها ثابت, but we have different modification. Or some part of this structure is cephal, or in some books cephem or cephal or cephem. They are رابعة. لا كلش لا. ما يصير. قانون جامعي هذا بس 10 دقائق. دكتور بس احنا طريق كل مرة. هذا كلكم هذا يجيبوا الكتاب تمام؟ العمادة بلغ الأساتذة بس 10 دقائق. روح العمادة. بس دكتور؟ أي. Cephalosporin, we have main structure here, and we have one part of cephalosporin, which is and cephalosporanic acid. And if you see here, we have 7 amino cephalosporanic acid, means 7 is this part. يعني الستراكشر صح كبيرة، بس الستراكشر مالتها كلها تقريبا نقاط مشتركة فيها. After the first cephalosporin was discovered in 1945, طبعا discovery, sheet, registration, and to be a drug or a medicine is another thing, you know, because in first slide we say it was discovered in 1961, but here discovery is 1945, because discovery, you know, we have discovery, we have development, we have optimization. And so we have discovery in 1945, but if you remember in the first slide we say we have 1961, first one. So I don't want this number, but just for you to have a knowledge about it. Scientists improved the structure of cephalosporin. Improve means optimization, making it better. It means modification. يعني مثلا نسوي تغييرات وراح نشوف شنو يكون نتيجة هذا التغييرات. يكون benefiting the patients or not. Against wide range of bacteria. Wider range of bacteria, it means making the compound more broad spectrum. Okay? Each time structure change, a new generation of cephalosporin was made. يعني كل مرة نحن نغير الستراكشر وكل مرة تيجي generation جديد من جماعة cephalosporin that we discussed today. So each time we change the structure and each time we get a new generation of cephalosporin. Right now we have 5 generations of cephalosporin. بس عم نحكي عن الجنريشنات اكو دول يختلف من دولة الآخر. مثلا هذا السيستم يختلف بين اليابان وامريكا، لو امريكا وبريطانيا شويه، اكو مواد مثلا امريكا يقول هذا الجماعه الثاني وبريطانيا يقول جماعه الاول. But for us there is no difference. For us the important point is we have a drug which has an indication. So right now we have 5 generations of cephalosporin. Most cephalosporin start with a CEF, CEF, CEPH or KIF. If you remember, we had Kiflex in Iran. Kiflex, which was the first generation one. Note that this classification system is not used consistently in any country. يعني ماكو انسجام بينها. يعني يكون مثلا في دولة الآخر هذا classification يختلف. But there is no difference for us. The most important point is we have a structure, we have a drug, this drug has registration, this drug has license, and we have a specific indication for it. What are cephalosporin used for? You know, we have antibiotics, and antibiotics are against bacteria, so they may be used to treat infection. بالعربي نحن عندنا التهاب for infection and inflammation, but infection is far more different than inflammation. Inflammation comes from flame, لهب, التهاب. Inflammation comes from flame, and inflammation is mainly related to the immune system. For example, inflammation in case of arthritis, inflammation in case of asthma, etc., etc. But infection is coming from a microorganism, fungal infection, bacterial infection. So this word is misleading. يعني هذا الكلمة كلش خطأ تستخدموها. التهاب. التهاب, we have inflammation, we have infection. Inflammation, which is coming from flame. يعني اكو سيارات ينقلون بنزين مكتوب فيها flammable, يعني قابل للاشتعال، قابل للحريق, flammable. So flame means لهب. Inflammation coming from immune system, but infection is coming from a bacteria. ما يصير. الأخير هي ما يصير. ما يصير. شنو ذنبه؟ جاي من Infection is bacterial infection, fungal infection, microbial infection, but inflammation is another story. So this word in Arabic, iltihab, is misleading. You must be very, very careful. So we use for treating infection caused by susceptible bacteria, such as bone infection, ear infection, skin infection, upper respiratory tract infection, urinary infection, etc., etc. So سريع سريع. What are differences between cephalosporin? Why we say we have different generation, different cephalosporin? أكيد أكون فرق بيناتهم. طبعا أول فرق يكون فرق بين structure. تمام؟ We have difference between their structure. طبعا structure الجيل الأول يختلف عن الجيل الثاني والثالث والرابع والخامس etc. So we have right now 5 generations of cephalosporin, which each generation differs slightly in their antibacterial spectrum. يعني الاختلاف أول شيء بدون ما بدنا نقول عليكم السلام. We have generation 1 versus generation 2 versus generation 3, etc., etc. We have different structures and we have different antibacterial spectrum. And this word spectrum is familiar for us because we know we have broad spectrum versus narrow spectrum. Broad spectrum versus narrow spectrum. Effective, they are killing certain type of bacteria. Certain type of bacteria, we know we have 2 types mainly. You have gram-positive and gram-negative. And in the last lecture, we discussed what's the difference between gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. Within each generation, there are differences in terms of administration. For example, we have oral cephalosporin, IV cephalosporin, we have difference in absorption, excretion, onset of action, duration of action. It means different pharmacokinetic. يعني النقاط الفرق بين جماعة السيفالوسبورين الجيل الأول والثاني والثالث والرابع والخامس. First of all is structure, second one spectrum of activity against positive or negative or more positive or more negative. We talked about this as well. And we have different pharmacokinetic property. And pharmacokinetic property means absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion, onset of action, duration of action. And we have both of administration. And in the trouble we will see that we have, for example, cefixime, which is oral one, and we have cefotaxime, which is IM or IV or parenteral. Are cephalosporin safe? Are cephalosporin safe? Generally, cephalosporin are safe drugs, generally. But if you remember, we have penicillin hypersensitivity reaction or penicillin sensitivity, but in case of hypersensitivity, it will reach a state that we call it anaphylactic shock, and you know what's anaphylactic shock. So generally, cephalosporins are safe. Generally, can we use for those patients who have sensitivity to penicillin or not? يعني عندنا مريض عنده sensitivity بالبنسلين نقدر نستخدم جماعة السيفالوسبورين for this patient or not? Okay. Who says لا? Who says yes? لا. Generally, we can use Cephalosporin for those patients who have sensitivity to penicillin, but we do not use cephalosporin for those patients who have hypersensitivity or anaphylactic shock experience with penicillin. يعني إذا sensitivity وحساسية خفيفة we use it, no problem. But if you have hypersensitivity and if you have experience of anaphylactic shock, no, we don't use it. So we have urticaria, allergic reaction, etc., etc. And another point is cephalosporin is associated with the reduced ability of blood to cold, leading to prolonged bleeding time. You know what's bleeding time, right? From physiology, bleeding time. الزمان الوقت اللي نحن نتخرج تخثر الدم. So bleeding time is prolonged when we use cephalosporin. In normal case, we don't have problem with this. But if a patient uses dabigatran or, for example, aspirin or anything which causes prolongation of bleeding time, we must be careful. So it's about safety of cephalosporin. What if I am allergic to penicillin? As we say, normally if someone is allergic or has sensitivity to penicillin, we can use safely cephalosporin. But if some patient has experienced anaphylactic shock, which is hypersensitivity to penicillin, which is neither, we don't give. It's about 5 to 15% of cases. 5 to 15% of cases we don't give because we have point of differences and we have point of similarity. That's why we don't give to patients who have experienced anaphylactic shock, which is worst case of sensitivity. Cephalosporin resistance. You know, in case of penicillin, we say penicillin resistance, and we say the main problem for the resistance of penicillin was production of beta-lactamase enzyme. You know that production of beta-lactamase enzyme is responsible for destruction of beta-lactamase. So generally, we had some bacteria which were able to produce beta-lactamase, and in case of production of beta-lactamase, maybe penicillin doesn't work anymore. And we had a solution for that point, which was beta-lactamase inhibitor, for example, glycolic acid, or tazobactam, or sulbactam in the previous lecture. So right now, the problem with the cephalosporin resistance. Do we have problem with the resistance in مقاومة ضد الcephalosporin? We have beta-lactam, so we have problem with the resistance. Yes, yes. We have right now, nowadays, problem with the resistance to cephalosporin. يعني نحن اليوم عندنا مقاومة لجماعة cephalosporin. And because we have beta-lactam weight inside structure of cephalosporin, we have some sort of bacteria which are able to produce beta-lactamase. Means this kind of bacteria can theoretically destruct beta-lactamase. But as a general rule, مقاومة جماعة الcephalosporin أكثر من البنسلين. يعني جماعة الcephalosporin بنسبة الريزيستنس أكثر. صح, we have the same problem with the beta-lactamase producing bacteria. صح, we have same problem with the resistance to cephalosporin. But overall جماعة الcephalosporin هو مالته أكثر, more. But right now we have increasing globally cephalosporin resistance, but compared to penicillin, it's not comparable. They are far more powerful. And usually alpha compared to beta-lactamase of bacteria. Bacterial resistance of beta-lactam antibiotic is due to we have some problems. First of all, we say we have beta-lactamase, which is an enzyme produced by the bacteria, reduced permeation of the drug through the outer membrane. الدواء ما يوصل البكتيريا. طبعا لحد الان احنا دخلنا المحاضره، لحد الان كلها ريفرشمنت فارماكولوجي ومايكروبيولوجي. Okay, because we discuss structure and now discuss this stuff, but you need this in your field. So first of all, reduce permeation of the drug through the outer cell membrane. يعني الدواء ما يقدر يدخل البكتيريا. شلون يدخل البكتيريا؟ So if we have reduced permeation of the drug through the outer membrane, it means we don't expect any activity from that drug. Or beta-lactamase, we talked about beta-lactamase. and inability of compound to the binding PDP, penicillin binding protein, PDP, penicillin binding protein. Yani, in case of mechanism of action, we say that this drug can bind itself to PDP, but if we have inability of the drug to bind to PDP, we don't have any activity. أكو نقطة مهمة كاليوم نحن نحكي عليها بس كلش خفيف. We have another word, extended spectrum beta-lactamase. يعني لحد الآن نحن قلنا we have an enzyme which we call it beta-lactamase, which is responsible for destruction of beta-lactam or responsible for ترتيب penicillin. But right now today we know that instead of beta-lactamase we have extended spectrum beta-lactamase. يعني نحن عندنا عائلة من beta-lactamase. يعني هم beta-lactamase اللي نحن نحكي عليها فيها تعداد عديدة. We have different types of beta-lactamase. We have extended spectrum beta-lactamase. يعني هذول هم صاروا أكبر. Extended spectrum beta-lactamase. هذا هو بس سامعي يفيدني. لحد الآن we say we have beta-lactamase responsible for destruction of beta-lactamase. But right now we know even beta-lactamase we have different types of beta-lactamases. We have just like we have different types of antibiotics, we have different types of beta-lactamase. هم عندنا beta-lactamase ضعيف وbeta-lactamase قوي وأقوى. تمام؟ يعني مو فد شيء وحيدا عندنا beta-lactamase احنا We have classification of cephalosporins. Cephalosporins are divided into first, second, third, fourth, and right now fifth generation. وكل مرة from first we go to the five الماضي يكون كلش أغلى. Okay? لأن الفيرست كان قديم والمواد القديم عادة أرخص. مو مؤمن؟ يجي مو؟ صحيح. From generation 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 we go from the cheap compound into more costly compound. هذا النقطة الأول. Based roughly on the time of discovery and their antimicrobial property. The first cephalosporins were designed as first generation cephalosporins, whereas later more extended spectrum cephalosporins classified as second and then fourth. If you go from generation 1 to 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then 5, as we say, نحن نرخص للأغلب. هذا نقطة الcost, which is very important in clinical daily practice. But right now we have another point. Each newer generation, it means generation 5 compared to generation 1, or generation 4 compared to generation 2 or 3, have significantly greater gram-negative antimicrobial properties than preceding generation. يعني كل مرة نحن نروح من واحد للثاني ومن الثاني للثالث ومن الثالث للرابع بيتا-لاكتام عفوا gram-negative activity يكون أكثر. نفس الشيء تقريبا صح للgram-positive يكون أقل. تمام؟ بس اللي كلش مهم لنا جماعة الgram-negative مثل ما حكينا في الأسبوع اللي قبل. يعني كل مرة نحن نروح من generation 1 لل 2 ومن 2 للثالث ومن الثالث للرابع والخامس gram-negative activity طبعا مو gram-negative activity يعني activity against gram-negative one لأنه نحن نقتل البكتيريا. So we have increase in gram-negative activity and تقريبا decrease in gram-positive activity. يعني نفس الاتجاه واحد منهم increase واحد منهم decrease واتجاه الرخيص من الغالي كلش معروفة. The preceding generation and generation قبلها in most cases is decreased activity against gram-positive one. يعني إذا فهموا هذا الباراجراف كل شيء يفيدكم. يعني if someone asks you compare generation 3 versus generation 2 or compare generation 4 versus generation 3 or 2. So كل مرة من generation 1 للاثنين ومن 2 لثلاثة ومن 3 لأربعة we have increasing in price, we have increasing in activities ضد الgram-negative and تقريبا decreasing activities ضد الgram-positive, which is very important for us. And we have more detail about anaerobic bacteria, pseudomonas. These are more detailed. It's not our job. You can read about them. Fourth generation cephalosporin However, they have broad spectrum activity. Broad spectrum means gram positive or gram negative. The classification of cephalosporin into generation is commonly practiced. Also, it's not always precise or it's often imprecise. يعني مو كلش دقيقة. يعني اكو مواد بالدولة يقولون هذا المادة generation 2، الدولة الآخر يقول generation 1. لو اكو مثلا قسم يقولون ما عندنا generation خامس، كل المواد اللي عندنا بالجنريشن خامس هذول كلهم من الرابع. بس ماكو اختلاف بيننا لأنه we have a compound, this compound has activity and we have indication for this compound. Other example, for example, fourth generation of cephalosporin is not recognized in Java. يعني حتى باليابان يقولون جنريشن رابع ما عندنا، كل اللي عندنا كلها يعني هذا الدواء موجود بس مو جنريشن رابع، جنريشن ثالث. جماعة الجديد من جنريشن ثالث. يعني هذا بس فهمتكم. For example, in Java, cephalosporin is classified as first generation cephalosporin, while the same drug in the United States is second generation. يعني عندك مادة cephalosporin generation واحد بالدولة وجنريشن الثاني بالدولة الآخر. But for us, that makes no sense because we have a cephalosporin, which is a drug which we can be prescribed and has activity. Just for you as a note. هم هذا يحكي عن CEF لو safe ماكو فرق، you can read and you can understand the difference between English speaking countries and another European country. For example, in Germany, mainly we have CEF, but in English speaking countries we have CEPH. We don't talk about this. Like here right now we have classification and properties of cephalosporin. We have different cephalosporin, okay? As name, for example, cephalexin, cephradine, cephadroxine, etc., etc. And we have different generation, we have different route of administration, we have different acidocystacenes, for example, in case of penicillin G and V, you remember. And both extended spectrum, we have narrow spectrum, broad spectrum, and even extended spectrum, and anti-pseudomonas activity, beta-lactamase resistance, and these stories. So this table is for you, but you must understand it. You must know the names of cephalosporin. You must know the names of different generations of cephalosporin. I don't ask you about this slide in detail, but it is important for you. Okay? يعني مرة أسألكم بهذا السلايد في الامتحان، بس هذا السلايد كلش مهم لأنه هذا فارماكولوجي. بصراحة بس أنا جبتها حتى يكون ريفرشمنت إذا ما ماخذين فارماكولوجي cephalosporin وإذا ماخذينه نسيته. So it is very important. يعني إذا أنتم تريدون تشتغلون كصيدلاني حتى أخير يوم من حياتكم راح تستخدمون هذا الجمله. إذا كنتم كصيدلاني. Structure activity relationship of cephexin. Cephexin is one of these cephalosporin, and if you see, we have cephexin, which is third generation of cephalosporin. نعم كذا زود سمعت كثير. سمعت كذا زود. لا. ولا جولة بس ولا مش بتنها. هذا مش. ولا جولة بس ولا مش. So we have this example. Cephexin, structure activity relationship of cephexin. You know we have main core, which is 7 aminocephalosporanic acid. We have different R1 and we have different R2. عندنا بنهاية المحاضرة نفس الجدول for different structure. We say we have this constant part, other part of summary, and we have different R1 and we have different R2. Okay? So we have خلاصة بنهاية المحاضرة. Chemical is composed of cephem nucleus. You know what cephem? You have cephem here, right? It has cephem nucleus. We have cephem nucleus, which has a 6-member dihydrothiazine. Okay. We have 6-member dihydrothiazine. So, in case of penicillin, we have 5-member ring, but here we have a medium 6-member ring. At position 3, cephem nucleus has a vinyl group. So, here we have vinyl group. We have double bond in this part. We have vinyl group for the absorption of intact molecule through intestine, and in the seventh position, acetic acid oxygen group and amino thiazole. And position 7 is this part. Yani, in case of cefixime, you have specific R1, you have specific R2, and you have main structure of 7-amino cephalosporanic acid, but it has been modified. Tamam? C double bond C. C double bond C. C is C, but not one bond, we have double bond. Okay? So we have that group in this position, and we have in the position 7, if you remember, we had NH2. Okay? But right now, instead of one of the H, one of the hydrogen, we have a big group, which makes it a compound. Cephexime, some cephexime يعمل يعني واحد المواد اللي عندها اعلى مبيعات بالعالم. cephexime يعني كل مره تروح الصيدليه تشتغل يوميا يعني كم وصفه يجيك للcephexime. That's why I wrote it here. So we have main structure of beta lactam, we have another 6-member ring which is dihydrothiazine, and we have different R1, different R2. Do not forget, please. In case of penicillin, we say just we have one R مكان للتغيير, مجال للتغيير. But here we have two مجال للتغيير. Cephalosporins, first generation cephalosporin. طبعا cephalosporin الدكاترة القديمة اللي احنا نسميهم دكاترة الحديثة كل يوم لأي مريض يكتبون سيفاليكسين، كيفليكس، سيفاليكسين، 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 كيفليكس. Cephalosporin is first generation cephalosporin and it's orally active. يكون ده شو بس Cephalosporin, we have generation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right now it says cephalosporin is first generation cephalosporin. يعني بدون ما نقرأ السلايد, we know that this cephalosporin is active more against gram positive or gram negative? More against gram negative. وgram negative activity مالتها يكون كلش قليل, or even more in detail we can say it's not active against gram negative, but it's active but not too much. So cephalosporin is third generation cephalosporin, and as you see we have different R1 and different R2. Okay, we have methyl group here again, we have beta-lactam group here, we have this 6-member ring here, we have NH2, but instead of one of the H we have this group here. So what is important for you is the name is important for you, the generation is important for you, and the structure. First generation cephalosporin are more effective against gram-positive bacteria, though they also work against some gram-negative bacteria. يعني لحد الآن قلنا we have narrow spectrum and broad spectrum. بس أكو جماعة أهم من broad spectrum ممكن نسميها extended spectrum. تمام؟ مثل ما قلنا البيتا-لاكتامين ممكن نسميه. أكو مادة newer than cephalosporin, which is cephadroxine. If you compare the structure of cephadroxine to the cephalosporin, we have just one point of difference. And that point of difference in this OH, para-hydroxyl group. يعني إذا أنتم تعرفون cephalosporin, تعرفون المادة الآخر نفس المادة, نفس الجنريشن. It is again the first generation cephalosporin and it's orally active. We have the same story here. First generation cephalosporin and it's orally active. About spectrum of activity is more against gram-positive and less against gram-negative. Cephadroxine is first generation cephalosporin antibacterial, and it is derivative of the first compound, which was cephalosporin. And what is the point of difference is para-hydroxy group. Why para? Because compared to this group, you remember, we say we have ortho, we have meta, and we have para. So compared to this group, we have these two, ortho, meta, and para. So we have para-hydroxy group if you want to compare this compound, which is cephadroxine of same generation, with the cephalosporin of the same generation, but it is a little bit more pure compound. It was patented. You know what's patent say, right? What's patent say? We talked about patents in the first semester. It says it is patented in 1967 and has been approved for medical use in 1978. Patents يعني براءة الاختراع، يعني إثبات الاختراع. It means in which year it has been patented 1967. شو الفرق بين هاي العدد وهاي العدد؟ تقريبا عندنا 12 سنوات. 11 سنوات. هذا ال 11 سنوات شنو نسميها؟ First of all, we say it has been patented. يعني الاختراع مالتنا قال patency. It has been patented. But it says patency was in 1967 and approved for medical use in 1978. يعني what was these 11 years? تحت التجربة ايه؟
بالمختبر بعد.
ايه هذا 1978 means أخذ تسجيل لايسنس للبيع بداخل الصيدليات للبيشنتس. But here it was تسجيل الاختراع كموليكول. يعني here in 1967 we say we have cephalosporins as a compound inside a lab داخل المختبر. عندك مادة جنريشن واحد جماعة السيفالوسبورين بس ما عندك حق تعطي للمريض. بس هذا ال 11 سنة الشركة اللي صنع هذا الدواء يدافع عن دواء حتى يكون هذا الدواء active preparation dosage form يأخذ الموافقة من for example FDA or European Medicinal Agency حتى يوصل بيد المريض. يعني بهذا السنة الشركة ما كان عندها حق حتى يبيعها لأنه ما شارك في تسجيل الدواء from FDA and European Medicinal Agency. But in this year they got license to sell it. And right now we know in order to produce a new drug at least we need 10 to 12 years. 10 to 12 years. تصنيع الدواء production and then getting license تسجيل from FDA and EMA. And that's why if you remember I told you that one of the best field of pharmacy is registration of medicines, drug regulatory affairs. أيمن من الأيمن؟ أيمن جاي. أيمن تذكر؟ حكينا عن drug regulatory affairs أول محاضرة العملي. drug regulatory affairs مو قلنا الجماعة الصيدلانيين اللي ياخذون أكثر راتب بالدنيا جماعة drug regulatory affairs. هذا regulatory affairs. هذا regulatory affairs يعني يسجلون الدواء in order to be able to sell these compounds. Cephalosporin. So we have cephalosporin, we have cephalosporin, we have cephalosporin. It's as well first generation cephalosporin. First generation cephalosporin, and we know the activity is against gram-positive and not gram-negative. It is parentally effective. Parentally effective يعني شنو؟ Over. But in case of cephalosporin, we say orally effective, cephalosporin orally effective, and here we say parentally effective. The compound is derivative of thiophene 2-acetic acid. Here we have thiophene 2-acetic acid. Thiophene 2-acetic acid, CH3COH. And we have thiophene 2-acetic acid inside the structure of this cephalosporin. يعني أنا ما أدري تحول هذا الستراكشر لأنه هذا الستراكشر موجود داخل هذا الستراكشر الأصلي ماله. تمام؟ يعني الموديفيكيشن مال R كان thiophene 2-acetic acid. It was first cephalosporin marketed in 1964 and continues to be widely used لحد الآن. cephalosporin كل شوية cephalosporin اللي يمنع بالعراق مع الأسف الجماعة الأقوى على السيفالوسبورين موجودة. يعني مو بسهولة تقدرون تلقون دواء من جنريشن واحد والثاني. يعني كل شركة وكل دكاترة يحبون جماعة الثالث والرابع والخامس. But in Europe, if you go to Europe, you see that we have generation 1 still in use, generation 2 still in use because they want narrowscope. So in these cases, we have again generation 1 cephalosporin. Cephalosporin is second generation cephalosporin, which is orally active. Second generation cephalosporin, it means more activity against gram negative, a little bit less activity against gram positive. So more activity against gram negative, and different gram negative accent. So in this case, if we look at the structure, we have still same core, but we have different R1 and different R2. Okay? And for these different R1 and R2, بنهاية المحاضرة نكون جدول for different R1 and R2 and different compound. Okay? Second generation cephalosporin target both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, while they are little less effective against gram-positive compared to first generation one. يعني إذا نقارن generation 2 with generation 1, الgram-positive activity مع generation 2 will be less. Gram-positive activity will be less. Gram-negative activity will be more. هذا مو مطلقا مو 100%, but it's a normal comparison. So because we go from generation 1 to generation 2, we know the drug will be costlier normally, يعني أغلى, and gram-positive activity will be شوية reduced, gram-negative activity شوية أكثر. Cephalosporin كل شوية موجود. is second generation cephalosporin and is parenterally and orally effective. يعني هذا كل زين. أم parenterally أم orally is نفس هذا التوافق. Parenterally and orally. Here we have a structure of cephalosporin. If you see, we have different R1 and different R2. But one of the very important point is we have cephalosporin axial, which is prodrug. أنا ما جبت الستراكشر مع cephalosporin axial لأنه structure كلش كبير وما تحتاجه. But it is important for you to know that we have prodrug of cephalosporin, and you know we discussed what is prodrug. البرودراج معناتها الستيج قبل يوصل للدراج. شوفوا يعني المادة برا inactive, inside your body will be activated. Then it does its work, it does its activity, and then through metabolism we have inactivation. And you know it's not as easy as I say, because we have different route for metabolism. We have active metabolite, inactive metabolite, or less active metabolite. We have different types of metabolism. But for you to know, it's important for you that cephalosporin axial is acetoxyethyl ester product. So it is very important for you that you know cephalosporin axial point of difference to the cephalosporin is acetoxyethyl ester product of cephalosporin. And inside our body, because just we hear this word ester, you know, inside our body we have esterase, and esterase means cleavage of ester bond, and cleavage of ester bond means activation of the hormone. So هذا المادة cephalosporin هو active. Cephalosporin axial product not cephalosporin not active, but inside our body it can get easily activated. If I ask you why do we use product? Why do we use product? Better pharmacokinetic properties. لا better pharmacokinetic properties. discussed was جماعة السيفالوسبورين. فرق واختلاف بين السيفالوسبورين versus penicillin. We know that we have نقاط الاشتراك, similarity point, and we have difference point, which are نقاط الاختلاف. We have difference point and we have similarity point. You know that we have in common beta-lactam rings. We have difference in 6-member versus 5-member ring, PENA. And in case of penicillin, we didn't have generations of penicillin, classification of generation 1 penicillin, generation 2 penicillin, etc., etc. But in case of cephalosporin, you know, we have different generation of cephalosporin, which we classify based on time of discovery. أكيد المادة اليوم نحن نلقاها ونقول هذا generation 1. لا, time of discovery يعني هذا السنوات الديسكفري مال new agent was all about generation 5. يعني حتى ورا 2010 كلها صار generation 5. اكو مجال generation سادس يجي اكيد. So generation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they have different host profile, they have different profile against gram-positive and gram-negative, and as a rule of thumb, generally, if you go from generation 1 to generation 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, we have increasing in cost, increasing activity against gram-negative, decreasing activity against gram-positive. And we have a problem with the pseudomonas, and as you remember inside our table we had that point if they are active against pseudomonas or not. So as we say, we have cephalosporin كدواء, we have cephalosporin axative كprodrug. نحن ما عندنا structure cephalosporin axative, but we discussed here we have ester linkage between cephalosporin and acetoxy ester prodrug, and when we say it is ester prodrug, it means we have ester linkage or ester bond, and you know inside our body we have esterase. This esterase can cleave or breaking down the ester linkage, so it means we have vibration of free drug. So mainly you see cephalosporin axative inside the market. لا هسه ناخذ الغيابات المشكله هذا. مو هواية مو هواية كمل لو صحن يا ابو كمل. لا عشان بدك تخلص نحن بس باقي ماكو واحد يطلع ولا تدخل. اكو واحد يجي في الجيران يقول انا عندي سؤال عن هذا الوصفه، تمام؟ So right now you have information عن جماعة البنسلين، you have information عن جماعة cephalosporin, and you have information عن جماعة الانالجيسيك. Inshallah, in this semester we discuss antifungal agent as well, which is very important for us. You know, if you work in the pharmacy on a daily basis, you get the condition of oral thrush, oral candidiasis, at the same time vaginal infection, athlete's foot. You know what's athlete's foot? We have fungal infection in جماعة رياضيين لأنه عندهم عرق، رطوبة، حرارة، مصاعات، كبائرهم. So we have athlete's foot infection. We talked about antiviral agent. Okay. So in order to talk about antiviral agent, we are designing a group against viruses. First of all, we must know what is the normal physiology or normal bacteriology of viruses, and discussed جماعة antiviral. And if you remember in previous lecture was, I think, or lecture before that, we discussed the word anti-metabolite. If you remember, we say we have anti-metabolite that you hear it frequently in case of cytostatica. Cytostatica means Jama'at al-anti-cancer, and as well Jama'at al-antiviral. We talk about anti-metabolite and some antibiotics. Cefixime. سمعنا الكلمة cefixime؟ أكيد صار cefixime. We have one of the frequently prescribed medicine, third generation cephalosporin, and it's orally active. بالعرب نحن نحب كلش جماعة الثيرد جنريشن cephalosporin. كلش نحب. Why؟ غالي. لأنه هم برود سبيكترم هم مو كلش غالي. طبعا أغلى من جماعة الجنريشن 1 والثاني، بس مو كلش أغلى مثل جماعة الرابع وخامس. خامس تقريبا ماكو. يعني نحن بالعراق كلش نحب جماعة الجنريشن 5. For example, cephalosporin. يعني أنا أذكر كنت أشتغل بالشركة كان عندنا سيفوتاكزين وسيفيروكسين 2010. سيفوتاكزين وسيفيروكسين عفوا سيفوتاكزين وسيفرياكزون. سيفوتاكزين وسيفرياكزون. سيفوتاكزين وسيفرياكزون يعني الأقل أوردر مال المدخل لازم كان مو أقل من 6400 قطعة. يعني إذا واحد يقول أنا أشتري مثلا 2000 قطعة منه 3000 لا مو شغال بيها. يعني هالقد مبيعاتها كان خيالي جماعة الثيرد جنريشن سيفالوسبورين. يعني نحن عندنا هذا العرض على 6400 والفوق، ما كان اكو 6400 يعني هالقد مبيعاتها كان خرافي. مو مثل بين كيلر، مو مثل جماعة A to Z مولتي فيتامين. تعرفوا جماعة A to Z مولتي فيتامين مبيعاتها واعد. فاللي بالعراق كان كلش مطلوب third generation cephalosporin. And right now we deal with the third generation cephalosporin which is orally active. الجماعة اللي بتلكم سيفوتاكزين وسيفترياكزون they are orally active. سيفوتاكزين and سيفترياكزون يعني تقدر تاخذها بالمرة. But cefixime is easier to use, right? Cefixime is easier to use. Cefixime third generation cephalosporin are more effective against gram-negative bacteria compared to both first and second one. يعني مقارنة بالجنريشن واحد والثاني, other generation is more active against gram-negative one, but they are not more active against gram-positive one. They are also more active against bacteria which may be resistant to previous generation of cephalosporin. We discussed different mechanisms of resistance, different mechanisms of power for the activity of cephalosporin. You remember in the previous slides, we discussed, first of all, we have the knowledge about beta-lactamase. And right now, we know that we have extended beta-lactamases. Extended beta-lactamase. And then we have reduced entry of the drug to the site of action. Reduced entry, يعني المادة ما يوصل بسهولة. Reduced entry of the drug to the site of action. And then we say we have another point that we discussed in the last lecture, PBP, penicillin binding protein. طبعا we say binding of the drug to the penicillin binding protein, but not always this binding is successful. So if you don't have successful bondage of PBP to the drug, we have resistance. And it says third generation cephalosporin is more active against gram-negative one, and at the same time it is more active against bacteria, الجماعة البكتيريا اللي كانوا for those antibiotic which we call it resistance. اوكي؟ يعني كلش اقوى. هذا الجرام نيجاتيف 1 هذا جماعه البكتيريا المقاومه. And as we state in some slide, we say here still we have problem with the cephalosporin resistance. Still we have problem with the beta-lactamase because we have different beta-lactamase. But generally, this problem is not as huge as the problem that we have with the penicillin. يعني جماعة السيفالوسبورين هم يكون منهم inactivity بسبب البيتا-لاكتاميز. But generally جماعة السيفالوسبورين أقوى من جماعة البنسلين. وكل مرة من داخل جماعة السيفالوسبورين من جنريشن واحد للثاني الثالث الرابع هذا القوة يكون أكثر وأكثر. So it is cefotaxime, cefotaxime. We have cefotaxime and ceftriaxone. Is a third generation cephalosporin and it is parenterally effective. It has a role as a drug, allergen, and as antibacterial drug. It is a member of 1,3-thiazole, 1,3-thiazole, which is this part, and oxy-O-ether of cephalosporin. Oxy-O-ether. You know, we have here N-double-bond-C. N-double-bond-C. That is what we call oxime. Okay? N-double-bond-C, we call it oxime, and 1,3-thiazole, which is this part, and this part is constant, that we have 7 aminocephalosporanic acid, we have NH2, but instead of NH2, instead of one of the hydrogen that we have this compound. Third generation also tend to be less active against previous generation when we talk about positive activity. So cefotaxime عشان اكو حالات الموت بواسطه السيفوتاكسين لانه ذكرها يعني الوصفه السيفوتاكسين مو كان اقل من 12 سيفوتاكسين، مو كان اقل من 12. 6 days each day 2. يعني 6 days each day يعني اقل وصفه كان 12. وكان عندنا حاله الموت في 2011 12 فهسه السيفوتاكسين مو عليها هذا الرغبه. قبل كان يعني واحد من اكثر المبيعات الصيدليه سيفوتاكسين. And if you know the company which introduced cefotaxime, which company? الشركه الرئيسيه اللي جايب سيفوتاكسين شركه صامر ما ادري تصنيع مال سيفوتاكسين مال شركه صامر وبعدين صامر كان صامر السيفيبين هسه هم تشوفون هذا الماده هوايه بالصيدليات. It's generation 4. Fourth generation cephalosporin and it is parenterally effective. طبعا غالي كلش بس اكو دكاتره خاصه جماعه الكدني جماعه البوليه كلش هوايه يكتبون سيفيبين. Fourth generation cephalosporin. Fourth generation cephalosporin works against both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. But it is generally used for more severe infection when those patients have weak immune system. Weak immune system معناتها immunocompromised patient. مناعة ضعيفة immunocompromised patient. Which type of patient we have with that immunocompromised problem? يعني يا نوع مال المرضى اللي عندهم immunocompromised state or they have decreased immune activity. دقيقة اللي يسوي نقل للعضو. It means the patient which got graft or transplantation. Why? Because intentionally we give some drugs. We want to weaken their immune system. تضعيف immune system which occurs intentionally. Okay, هذا نقطة. Another immunocompromised patient. بالزمان الكورونا we did talk frequently about immunocompromised patients. So جماعة for example kidney transplant. بعد infection لا الجماعة اللي عندهم infection activity مال immune system مالتهم يزيد. جماعة ال HIV مو جماعة HIV. طبعا HIV هو فيروس. جماعة الإيدز acquired immunodeficiency syndrome بواسطة HIV. يعني HIV هو فيروس، بس هذا فيروس يسبب الإيدز، لأن احنا نسميها acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. فجماعة transplantation, for example, kidney transplantation or kidney graft, they have immunocompromised activity. جماعة لو عندهم HIV، لو عندهم AIDS acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. بعدين منو عنده immunocompromisation؟ منو عنده immune system مالتها كلش ضعيف؟ لا لا، كانسر مو بالبداية، بالنهاية اكو جماعة كانسر اللي ياخذون دواء انتي كانسر كيموثيرابي راديو ثيرابي اي يكونون immunocompromised، يعني الجماعة اللي ياخذون سايتوستاتيك. بعد روماتيزم، لا روماتيزم هايبر. No, we discussed about kidney transplantation. الجماعة اللي ياخذون steroid, those patients who are actively getting steroid, corticosteroid, for example, for cases of psoriasis, for cases of rheumatism, okay? The patients who are on steroid, steroid causes immunocompromisation. جماعة الستيرويد اللي ياخذون ستيرويد، لا الجماعة الستيرويد عندهم immunocompromisation. بعد immunosuppressant الجروب الأول. جماعة الimmunosuppressant اكو جماعة الأدوية نحن نعطي لهذول ياخذون kidney transplantation. لا اكو جماعة كلش مهمين بس دايابيتي بالضبط. الجماعة الدايابيتي immune system مالتهم كلش صحيح. يزيد العمر مالتهم تصنيف immune system يكون أكثر. That's why we have fungal infection in their food. That's why when they get infection, they cannot heal easily. That's why one day we get gangrene and then we get amputation. جماعة الدايابيتس تقريبا كلهم immunocompromised، يعني جماعة الدايابيتس patient immune system مالتهم كلش ضعيف. That's why in case of corona 2020-2019 حكينا كلش هواية على جماعة الدايابيتس، قلنا كلش خطر. Why? Because they are immunocompromised. يعني أي واحد ياخذ ستيرويد، أي واحد عنده kidney transplantation، لو liver transplantation، لو getting liver graft، ستيرويد، immunosuppressive agent، أي واحد عنده diabetic، هذول جماعة immunocompromised patient. هذا الكلمة كلش مهم لكم يكون أهم. So why we discuss immunocompromised patient? We say effective is fourth generation cephalosporins. They are generally used for those infections in those which have weakened immune system. Or another word, those patients are immunocompromised. Come on? Second. Next, fifth generation cephalosporins. طبعا هذا generation ما كان موجود بالكتاب اللي وزارة التعليم العالي يقول نحن نستخدم هاي الكتاب لكل الصيدلة. مو تعليم عالي كلها. Fifth generation cephalosporins هسه موجود. هسه تشوفون we have this company فايزر كلش معروف. شنو الأدوية الآخر جماعة فايزر؟ يعني هذا فايزر ماذا company you know? They have patency for production of medicine. Gabapentin فياجرا ما كان مال هاي الشركة. كان عندها مبيعات كلش زينة. بعد سيليكوكسيد مال فايزر كان ايش؟ سيليكوكسيد. هذا الشكل هنا دارك بلو. Simple, very simple design they have. طبعا هاي الشركة مال جماعة مال أمريكا، بس صاحب الأصلي مال هذول الجماعات من الجماعة لراح من ألمانيا لأمريكا after World War II. They found this company Pfizer, and for example, right now they have cephalosporin, which is not right now in your textbook. Cephalosporin is not right now in your textbook. It's currently 5th generation or next generation cephalosporin. نحن ما دام عند اسم يعني عند تسجيل يعني عند license for vape. Only cephalosporin of 5th generation inside United States. It's active against MRSA, methicillin resistant staph aureus. حققوا مرات بالكتب تشوفون بدل methicillin يقول multiple resistant staph aureus. هم MRSA يكون methicillin resistant staph aureus لو multiple resistant يعني اثنيناتهم صح. Different groups. It is active against methicillin resistant staph aureus يعني كان عندها مشكلة ويا MRSA and gram-positive bacteria. يعني هذا الاسم وهذا generation تعرفون. Cephalosporin is a novel cephalosporin 5th generation. Cephalosporin 5th generation. من هذا الواحد cephalosporin جماعة الخامسة مننا cephalosporin. It is used as 5th generation developed for the treatment of infection with gram-negative bacteria that have become resistant conventional. Conventional antibiotic يعني antibiotics اللي نورمال نحن نستخدمها. إذا عندك البكتيريا ماكو شيء يشتغلوا عليها نحن نستخدم cephalosporin. It was studied for urinary tract infection, intraabdominal infections, and etc. أكو هذا التركيبة كلش مهم زيرباكسا. طبعا ما عليكم تذكرون الاسم باقي مصلوب زيرباكسا. أكو تركيبة بين cephalosporin and azobacter. أكيد سامعين هاي الكلمة azobacter. azobacter beta-lactamase resistance. لا هذا الكلمة azobacter يجي من العائلة اسمهم شنو؟ inhibitor صح beta-lactamase inhibitor مو beta-lactamase inhibitor لأنه beta-lactamase هو انزيم beta-lactamase inhibitor عائلة الدواء ضد beta-lactamase هو انزيم. So you have cephalosporin is combined with the beta-lactamase inhibitor which is azobacter which protects cephalosporin from degradation. يعني لحد الآن نحن واصلين generation خامس جيل الخامس ولحد الآن عندنا مشكلة. يعني لحد الآن جماعة العلاج غريب. لحد الآن نحن وصلنا جنريشن خامس. يعني ليش هذا الدواء لكم حتى تعرفون هذا الستوري. لحد الآن نحن واصلين جنريشن خامس ولحد الآن عندنا مشكلة مال البيتا لاكتاميز انزيم باقي. يعني لحد الآن نحن نخاف من انزيم البيتا لاكتاميز which is responsible for destruction or تحطيم الدواء. فهو الدواء كلش جديدة. cephalosporin azobacter بتكون يعني كلش زين. بس فيها وحيد مشكلة. شنو المشكلة؟ غالي كلش غالي. لأنه مادة جديد مادة تركيب مادة ما بها جنريك كل ما بالكومباني كلش غالي. هذا ستراكشر مال cephalosporin طبعا نفس الشيء هنا 7 امينو cephalosporin هي R1 and R2 دقيقة عين دقيقة. وأنت أصلا ساعة ونص تأخير جاي. يعني أنت قاعد بمكانك تتعب. Here we have this table. آخر سلايد. Here we have this table. As you see, here we have المنطقة الأساسية اللي هو الطابق. We have R1 and we have R2. And as you see, here we have generic name. We have different R1 and different R2. Okay? ومرات اكو R3 مرات بس اللي احنا عندنا فوكس وتركيز R1 و R2. So it makes it easy. يعني هذا مو شيء جديد في المحاضرة. هذا كان summarization ماضي قبل. وخمينا هذا الشيء. خمينا هذا الشيء. تمام. conclusion أنتم تقرأوها. تمام يعني؟ خسرتوا شيء اليوم؟ ها؟